And I want you to biblically try to discern this, try to answer this.
My son, keep your father's commandment, forsake not your mother's teaching. You get the idea here that basically what we have, go to chapter 7, you see it again. I know this is being a bit repetitive, but I really want to drive home this overarching theme is that you have instruction from parents to a son. Now, obviously, the same kind of instruction could be given to a daughter. But here's the thing. Some of us were not raised by godly parents. I think that if we have what we want, which is God saving a lot of people and a lot of first generation Christians and a lot of well-saved people making up the church. You know what happens if you evangelize and you seek the Lord and you pray and God actually moves and God answers those prayers and God saves people and he builds the church with newly saved people, is you end up typically with first generation Christians. Probably Grace Fellowship Manchester is largely that, from what I know. Your church is much like the church back in San Antonio. It's not altogether new first generation, but largely so. And you know what that means? That means that most of us have lost parents. That means most of us did not have parents with wisdom. In fact, especially this being directed at sons, the truth is that most of the men in our churches, it may not be the case in all churches, but most of the men in Grace Fellowship and Grace Community, they didn't have good examples. And I'd be the first one to say, yes, we might have gleaned some good things from lost parents, but largely our parents lacked wisdom. They lacked the kind of instruction that you would get here. And so for a first generation Christian, even if we're older, this book is massively helpful because it gives us that wisdom that maybe we never got from our parents. But then if you are Christians, this is the kind of stuff that you really want to be emphasizing to your children, because obviously that's what this is. This is instruction from parents to a son. And you've seen that over and over. And so I think the question that we want to ask is, what are the primary topics that the book of Proverbs would have us focus in on as we're seeking to instill wisdom in our children? Undoubtedly, as parents, we, more than teachers, more than school teachers, it's parents who have a responsibility to instruct their children, to train their children, to give children wisdom. The truth is that public schools certainly are not doing that. And then private schools, you know, that all depends on the quality of the school and the quality of the individual teachers. We may have Sunday school teachers that teach our children in the school. We obviously, there's pastors, there's different kinds of teachers that our children might be exposed to. But you know, as parents, we ultimately have the responsibility for our children. And so what you don't want to do, those of you that have children, those of you that hope to have children, last thing you want to do is just be a passive parent. In other words, you don't want to just let your children become what they're going to become. I mean, that's the world's mindset these days. Well, you know, we're going to let our children be what they want to be, and they're going to be a he or a she as they want to be, and they're going to basically choose their gender and choose the gender they want to be with, and we're going to leave it all, you know, far be it that we should impose our religion on our children or impose our values on our children. See, that's the mindset today, that no, we're going to let our children think the way they want to think and do the thing they want to do. Well, let me tell you, that leads people to hell, is what that does. And we don't want to fall into any kind of thinking like that. It is our responsibility to fill the minds of our children with the right things, with wisdom, with truth, with scripture. And so what I want to show you, this is such a glorious book that God has given us, the Proverbs. This is so unique. It's not like any other book in the Bible. And so, okay, here's the first thing. The book of Proverbs deals, I've never put these things exactly in a scale to be able to measure the percentage that we get different things in the book. But I've read it over and over and over, and I've studied it very close and made extensive notes. And I'll tell you this, that in my estimation, one of the things that you find spoken about in the Proverbs as much or more than anything else is, you tell me. Does anybody have any idea?
The fear of the Lord?
No, I mean, the fear of the Lord is there, but it's only mentioned just a few times.
Is it about the fool?
It certainly says a lot about the fool. But do you know what you will find as much or more than anything in this book is it talks about how you use your mouth. It may come to a surprise. It may surprise some of you. I want to show this to you. I want you to see this. The mouth. And if I'm going to show you the mouth as it's found on, there's a lot actually said about women and their mouth, but I'm going to show you specifically that in a second. But let's just dive in. Maybe where would be a good place? Perhaps in chapter. Dive in chapter 10. Just, I want you to see, if chapter 10, verse 6. The mouth of the wicked conceals violence. Okay, turn the page. If you go to verse, well, you turn the page in my Bible. If you go to verse 8, a babbling fool. So yes, it speaks about the fool, but notice he's babbling. Verse 10, a babbling fool. Verse 11, the mouth of the righteous over against the mouth of the wicked. Verse 13, on the lips. There it is. Verse 14, the mouth of a fool. Verse 18, whoever utters slander. Verse 19, when words are many, transgression is not lacking, but whoever restrains his lips. Verse 20, the tongue of the righteous is choice silver. 21, the lips of the righteous feed many. I mean, you start to get the feel here. Verse 31, the mouth of the righteous brings forth wisdom, but the perverse tongue. You see this idea of mouth, what we say, the lips, the tongue. Verse 32, the lips of the righteous know what is acceptable, the mouth of the wicked, what is perverse. You go to chapter 11, verse 9, with his mouth, the godless man would destroy his neighbor. You go down to verse 11, by the mouth of the wicked. Verse 12, whoever belittles his neighbor Obviously, that's done with the mouth. But a man of understanding remains silent. Again, that's the mouth. Verse 13, slandering reveals secrets. Slandering, something you do with the mouth. He who is trustworthy in spirit keeps a thing covered. If we go to verse 26, the people curse. There's the mouth. A blessing is on the head of him who sells it. You go to chapter 12, verse 6. The words of the wicked lie in wait for blood, but the mouth of the upright delivers them. You go down to verse 14. From the fruit of his mouth, a man is satisfied with good. Go to 17 of chapter 12. Whoever speaks the truth gives honest evidence. A false witness utters deceit. Verse 18. There's one whose rash words are like sword thrusts, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Brethren, this goes on. Go to verse 19, truthful lips, lying tongue. Go to verse 22, lying lips. Verse 23, the heart of fools proclaims folly. Go to chapter 13, verse 2, the fruit of the mouth. Verse 3, whoever guards his mouth, he opens wide his lips, in the second part of that. 5, the righteous hates falsehood. Again, that's speaking lies. This goes, you go to chapter 14, verse 3, the mouth of the fool, lips of the wise. Verse 5, a faithful witness, a false witness. There's lying there. Verse 7, words of knowledge. Verse 9, fools mock. But here's the point. This just goes on and on and on. If you went through, this is what I've done. This is the reason I'm able to find those so quickly is because I've gone through with one of those tiny little Bible markers, and I've underlined in green every single place in the Proverbs where it speaks or refers to anything that's uttered with the lips, said by the mouth, anything that has to do with lies or slander or gossip or anything, any way, shape, or form that we speak, anything that has to do with the tongue or the mouth or the lips. And it's everywhere. Now, that ought to grip us. It ought to grip us because one of the Proverbs says, there is life and death in the mouth. Now think with me about that. Do you realize you can kill your children with your mouth? You can kill your spouse with your mouth. You can kill the lost with your mouth. Do you know so much of our testimony before the watching world has to do with how we speak? And there are some powerful statements concerning the mouth among these verses. I want you to see a few of these. Look at chapter 6, verse 12. 6:12. A worthless person, a wicked man, goes about with crooked speech. Do you know, when I first moved to Texas, I worked for John Seitzma. John is one of our 5 elders at Grace. He's the one heading up the team. He's in San Antonio right now. He heads up the team in Nepal. And John's son, Johnny, when I was working for John, he told me that his dad needed to have some buildings built on their property. I think they were basically greenhouses. And they had a man come out and give John a quote. And the man had a foul mouth. The man just kept swearing. And Johnny told me that his dad said to that man, do you know, I have found that men who swear are liars. And he didn't use that guy to build his buildings. And you know, that's always stuck with me. And do you realize that that's basically, if you recognize what John was saying, if a man swears, if a man has crooked speech, you know what? It tells you a lot about the man's heart. It tells you that he's a wicked man. And you have every right to think that the man who swears is a liar. I've always found that to be the case. John has found, and I think that this text right here, let me tell you something. You listen to the way somebody speaks, and their mouth is a window into their heart. There's no question about that. Listen to a man talk, and you'll know who he is. One of the things that we had to learn over the years in our interacting with foreigners in third world countries, as we have sought to plant churches and send out missionaries and even support missionaries in other countries, do you know, there was a tendency, I know it was a wrong one, but there was a tendency on our part in the beginning, maybe sometimes still, to accept Mexicans, Indians, just basically people that we were dealing with, maybe in Turkey, in there's a team over in Lebanon, people that we've dealt with in Nicaragua. There can be a tendency to say, you know, when their language, when their speech is not so pure, when you see flaws, when you see failure, if you catch them not always exactly telling the truth, there can be a tendency, because, well, they're from another country and you feel like maybe they don't have as much light, or they don't have as much privilege, or they don't have as much, there can be a tendency, and we have done this, where we basically give them the benefit of the doubt, and we've gone ahead and we've worked with these people, and inevitably we find that we made a mistake, that we should have the same expectation for righteousness it doesn't matter what country. And a lot of that comes back to how a person speaks. Sometimes you'll be around a person and they'll slip with their tongue. That's not a minor thing. That just tells you that maybe they were trying to cover up, cloak themselves, but a person's mouth is a dead giveaway. And this is one of the verses that especially stands out to me. Let me show you a few others. Chapter 10, verse 19. I mean, this is a verse that I learned when I was first saved, and it's one of those very wise. Remember, brothers and sisters, these are the kind of things that we really want to instill in our children. When words are many, transgression is not lacking. Whoever restrains his lips is prudent. If we want to do anything, we want to teach self-control to our children. One of the things that was just mandatory when our children were growing up, saying no to anybody in authority was absolutely unpermissible. I mean, starting with parents, but anyone in authority. They did not say no. We have to teach our children to control their lips, to control what they say, not just to speak everything they think and everything they feel and everything. You don't want to raise your children to just vent whenever they want to. That's one of the things you'll see that is stressed here in Proverbs more than anywhere, maybe only in all of the Bible, has to do with the use of the rod. And if there's a place to use the rod on our children, it is in the control of their mouth. It is what comes out of their lips. We want to really instill this in our children. But there's a principle right there. When words are many, transgression is not lacking. You get people that just talk too much. People that talk too much will inevitably go to gossiping. They inevitably go to slandering. They inevitably go to some kind of storytelling, truth stretching. People that talk too much are typically gossips. And look, I recognize this. We have different personalities. And some people are more talkative. Some people are more type A personalities. I recognize that. Some of us are more naturally quiet people. But whatever it is, we want to be very measured in what we speak, how we talk, what we have to say. We want our speech to be profitable. And that, that's precisely what, maybe I'm going to go over here a couple times. You don't have to turn here. I want you all to stay right where you are. But when Paul is talking to Christians in Ephesians chapter 4, he says this. He said that we need to put away falsehood, and we need to speak the truth with his neighbor, for we're members of one another. And he goes on to say, let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. I mean, we want to speak in ways that are profitable. Yes, there's a place to speak friendly. Yes, there's a place to speak and ask people how they're doing and talk about what's happening in the world. I recognize that. But we want to be very mindful that we are using our voices to build each other up. Because a person, this. If you've lived any amount of time, you know the amount of damage that the tongue can do. And of course, James chapter 3 speaks about the world of iniquity that's found in the tongue, and how you can turn these massive ships out on the sea with just this tiny little rudder. And in the same way, this tiny little member called the tongue that's found in us has the ability just to turn such massive amounts of mass and set ablaze the greatest possible fires. People's tongues, you've inevitably, undoubtedly, just knowing what I know about the history of Grace Fellowship, you've had people in the church that have not been able to control their tongues. If there's any place that this just can become a raging fire, it's in the church. And I'll show you another one here. Let's look at chapter 16, verse 21. 16:21. It's the later part of this verse here. It says, sweetness of speech increases persuasiveness. I mean, what a tremendous thing to teach your children. I mean, you want your children to be profitable in life. You want them to be able to use their tongue to their own advantage. Don't we want, oftentimes, we want to persuade people. Oftentimes, we want to convince people. Oftentimes, we are trying to use our mouth to have something happen the way that we think it ought to happen. And we're trying to persuade somebody. And sometimes for proud people, a default mechanism can be scream louder, talk more fiercely, try to just use your tongue to tear down anybody that would oppose you. I mean, oftentimes in the world, that's what happens, but there is a sweetness of speech. And look, I'll just admit right off, I never had parents that taught me this. I never saw this until I became a Christian. I see this played out in my wife all the time. My wife is she's one of the sweet talkers. And anybody that knows her, you know that. She talks gently to people. She talks with a sweetness of speech, and it's persuasive, and it's just a reality. But it's one thing to read it, but to actually apply it to our lives. That's the kind of thing right there that we want to instill in our children. You see, when it says we should train our children, it's not just that what we're doing is we're trying to get our children not to do wrong. We want to teach our children what the wisest paths are in life. Remember, what is that greatest possible good? What is the greatest possible path of happiness? And here's one. It's a sweetness of speech. It's not the person that loses control of themselves. It's not the person that, they stay silent because they're just holding it all in, and then it bursts out and they're in a rage and they turn all red and blood fills their cheeks and they're angry, and the wrath of man. That's not the way we persuade people. So another verse here to look at would be look at chapter 15, verse 1. This is a similar verse, but it's different. You see, we can talk sweetness of speech is persuasive. This soft answer turns away wrath. It's a little bit different, because you notice a harsh word stirs up anger. Well, this is almost the picture of, what this is a picture of? This is a picture where people are already communicating and they're already getting stirred up, and somebody actually says something in a harsh way, in a strong way, and the other person answers softly. And what does it do? It takes the fire out, takes the heat out. It calms everybody. You see, these are the things we do with our tongues, and none of us are foreign to this. None of us. And anybody here that's married or has ever been married, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because there's not a perfect marriage in the world. And this and then the way we deal with our children, or the way we deal with conflict, or the way we deal with people in the church. And this has such practical ramifications for us. Let me take you to another one, chapter 18, verse 21. And I mentioned this before, but I want to leave you with this. Death and life are in the power of the tongue. Now, I know that before, when I was just ripping off all these Proverbs passages that deal with our words and our mouth, and I didn't get this far in the Proverbs. I quit. But just right here on the page I'm at, look with me at Proverbs 18:8. The words of a whisperer. 18:13. If one gives an answer before he hears, it's folly and shame. Verse 17. The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. Verse 20. From the fruit of a man's mouth, his stomach is satisfied. He is satisfied by the yield of his lips. Verse 23, the poor use entreaties. The rich answer roughly. Chapter 19, verse 5, a false witness breathes out lies. Verse 7, he pursues them with words. Verse 9, a false witness, again, breathes out lies. You go to verse 13, a wife's quarreling. You go to verse 20, listen to advice, accept instruction. Verse 25, a scoffer. 27, hear instruction. 28, there's mocking. There's the mouth of the wicked. Verse 29, scoffers. Anyway, I'm showing you once again just how much this book of Proverbs speaks about the tongue. If you go back to 18:21, death and life are in the power of the tongue. And I would just ask this question. What ways are life and death in the power of the tongue? Give me examples. There's many ways. Go ahead and give me an example, if you can think of any.
Do you mean like all the ways you could sin with your mouth, like by lying or?
Well, no, I mean, what ways could the mouth actually, what way, how is there power in the tongue to
Do you
lead
mean
to
like-
life or to death?
Like if someone is a false witness and brings someone.
That could
Got it.
happen. Has that ever happened in history where a false witness went to the witness stand and lied and sent somebody to the gas chamber or to death row, I mean, certainly that's happened.
I
That's
think
one
like
way.
it's like putting someone down, like slandering someone. Like, and everything that you could be saying could be true. Like, for instance, Satan brings slanderous stuff against us that a lot of times is true, but the remedy to it is to go to Christ. But some people will commit suicide, for instance. Like, they think that they've, done like the unpardonable sin or something, and they're constantly bombarded by, either someone like a preacher telling them that, and then they could kill themselves. And
Well, you think let's think of themselves. Has anybody ever killed themselves because people have spoken just evil things about them? I mean, listen, in high school, when you're at school level, do you know how much of a problem? Brethren, let me tell you something. When I was in college, I was an engineering student, but I had to take some of these elective courses. And of course, I wanted to take the easiest ones I possibly could. The engineering classes were hard enough. I took a psychology class. And let me tell you what happened. We had a major term paper due. And the day that those papers were due, everybody was there because this was a massive part of your grade. And you know what? The professor didn't show up at first. And so I'm sitting in the corner. I'm in the back row, all the way over in the corner. My entire row is all girls except for me. The professor doesn't show up. So the first girl hands her paper to the second girl and says, "Will you turn it in for me?" She says, "Yes." The professor still doesn't come. So she hands both those papers to the next girl and says, "Will you hand them in for me?" "Yes." Do you know that kept happening until I had the whole row of papers on my desk? Do you know what we had to write about? Now, I was lost at the time. We had to write about death. This was a psychology class. And so professor still doesn't come. So what do? Well, I got a stack of papers about some of the most intimate stuff in somebody's life. And so I start reading them all. Do you know every single one of those girls had contemplated suicide at some time in their life? In fact, I have notes here on doing my next track on reasons why people shouldn't commit suicide. And actually, Todd Friel created a booklet called 13 Reasons Not to Commit Suicide, which I guess was like an answer to some Netflix show that I guess was popular several years ago. But he said secular schools would take that track. Atheists would take that track because they felt like somebody had an answer. Somebody actually cared for them. But do you know, when I heard about that just several weeks back, and I began making notes on the possibility of doing a track on reasons why young people should not commit suicide, I actually just looked online to find out what this Netflix thing was all about, and it gave the 13 reasons why the girl in the show committed suicide. And it was very realistic. And do you know how many of them had to do with what people said with their mouth about her that were just crushing? And when you're in high school and you want friends and you horrible things happen. Now, there were other things, and then think about this. We've got the ability with the tongue to tell people about the Lord. But here, do you know what you have the ability to do with your tongue too? You have the ability to teach your children about Christ and show them the way of life. But then you also have the ability with your tongue to be the worst hypocrite in front of your children with your tongue, to where they say, my mom, my dad, they're one of the biggest reasons why I would never become a Christian. I've seen their Christianity. You see, there's so many ways that we could elaborate on in the way that the tongue just is so powerful. It can be persuasive. It can shed light, but it also can do massive damage. We can do so much damage to people by our tongue.
It's a massive thing at the minute, obviously, like with like YouTube and Twitter, because people are anonymous, so people can say pretty much anything that they want. And some of the most terrible things are said that no one would probably say it to their face, but because of like this ability to be able to say stuff to someone without being found out, it's like went through the roof. And that's one of the main reasons why there were so many deaths, like you've just said this year, with some of the TV presenters and actors. And
yeah, there's many other ways that we could talk about where the tongue, both physical death and spiritual death, both physical life and spiritual life, that we could talk about where the tongue comes into play. I mean, brethren, do you realize that as Christians, one of the things that we as a redeemed people have the responsibility to do is to use our tongues to one of the ways that we're light in this world, yes, through our actions, but also through our words. And you do realize that Jesus said on the day of judgment that we will either be justified by our words or will be condemned by our words. I mean, that's a reality. Our words are such a dead giveaway to who and what we are that we'll be judged by our words on Judgment Day. Our words collectively taken together are going to prove who and what we were. So now, here's something I want you to see. One of the things that is also stressed is this son is given a lot of instruction concerning women. In fact, When we talk about godly women or an excellent wife, yes, in the New Testament, we may go to places like 1 Peter chapter 3, we may go to Titus 2, but where do we inevitably go as well? Proverbs 31. And it's not just Proverbs 31 that has a lot to say about women. Actually, the Proverbs altogether have a lot to say about women. And I want you to see this. Now, we could turn this around. There's no question. We could give instruction to our daughters that had parallels when we're warning them about men in the world. But one of the things that you're going to see here, now remember the verse that we looked at, that where we looked at the fact that a man's words are a dead giveaway of a wicked man. One of the things that you're going to find out about the woman who our young men, this is the kind of thing we want to instill in our children too. About most of our children are going to get married. Most of our children are going to be exposed to those of the opposite sex. And we need to warn. We need to equip. We need to arm our children with wisdom. And one of the things that you find out about a bad woman, and I'm going to emphasize that because that, yes, it says a lot about men too throughout the Proverbs. But this very specifically, women get brought up and their words. What you can tell women by their tongue. And if you think about what Peter says, he specifically says that a meek and quiet spirit, that is extremely desirable and beautiful to the Lord. And look at this, Proverbs chapter 2. Look at verse 16. We're going to follow a string here, and I want you to see this. This is a thread that moves through the entire Proverbs. Verse 16 of chapter 2. You will be delivered from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words. Now, I think that is very interesting. Now, if we only had it once, it would be interesting. But it's the repetition that I find that I think is powerful. You have the forbidden woman. The reality is that every woman is forbidden to our sons, and every man is forbidden from our daughters, except they be married. I mean, we really want to instill this in our children, because the world is your country. About 20% of marriage age men and women are actually married. People shack up. People have partners. You have men all over your country that are living with forbidden women. Who forbids them? God forbids them. And notice the thing about forbidden women and the adulteress. And obviously, this one woman specifically is forbidden because, not just because she's single and you're not married to her, but because she's actually married to somebody else. But notice her smooth words. Now let's follow the thread. Go to chapter 5, verse 3. 5:3. Notice again, the lips, and I'm reading from the ESV, the lips of a forbidden woman. Now, isn't that interesting? The first thing when she's brought up right here, that this son, who's being called to be attentive to the wisdom of his father, the first thing that he brings out about this forbidden woman is watch out for her mouth. Watch out for her lips. They drip honey. Her speech, smooth. Again, let's keep following the thread here. Look at chapter 6, verse 24. Now, ladies, I'm not trying to be partial or bigoted or unfair or prejudiced. This is the way the Proverbs speak. And notice this again. 6:24, the evil woman. Now, I have a footnote there that says, it could be translated the wife of a neighbor. But notice this, the smooth tongue. You see, that of the adulteress, it's the same thing again. Do not desire her beauty in your heart. Do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. Do you know what? We are basically raising up a generation of children where they are being encouraged to do whatever they want with whomever they want, whenever they want, when it comes to sexuality. That's the mindset today. And scripture is, listen, it's the way of death. It's because of these things the wrath of God is coming. We need to warn our children. Just because our sons encounter a beautiful girl doesn't mean that they have license to go do whatever they want to with her. In fact, we need to warn our sons and our daughters that there's real danger out there. That's what's happening here. You have a responsible father who recognizes the evils and the dangers that his son is going to encounter in this world. And one of the primary things is this woman who comes with her beauty and she comes with her tongue. Go to chapter 7, verse 5. Here it is again. The forbidden woman. Wisdom. Say to wisdom, you're my sister. Call insight your intimate friend to keep you from the forbidden woman. This is wisdom, to stay away from the forbidden woman, from the adulteress with her smooth words. It's like Solomon cannot even talk about this woman without introducing her words. Look down at verse 21. Because this keeps going. I mean, from verse 5 all the way down to verse 21, this is an unbroken text that just deals with this woman. And you see her again in verse 21, her smooth talk. But look where it goes. He follows her as an ox goes to the slaughter. A stag is caught fast till an arrow pierces its liver, as a bird rushes into a snare. He does not know that it will cost him his life. This is what we're talking about. This is wisdom. This is life and death. If we follow this further, go to chapter 9, verse 13. 9:13. Here we get a verse that says, the woman folly is loud. Now we could look at this and we could say, well, is foolishness being personified as a woman over against wisdom back in 9:1 is personified as a woman? Or are we actually dealing with this same forbidden woman? Well, it's hard to tell. It's probably dealing with both. And if you jump over to chapter 14, verse 1, you can see where you have a comparison of a wise woman. She builds her house, but folly, you notice the foolish woman is just called folly. So there's a real close tie here between a woman who is foolish being foolishness itself. It can be hard to tell whether it's actual foolishness or actually the woman. In 14:1, it's obviously the woman. The woman, she's called folly because she does foolish things with her own hands. She tears down her own house. But if we go back there to 9:13, the thing about this woman, folly, is she's loud. Meek and quiet spirit, you remember, is what Peter said. You know, one of the things we want to warn our sons about is loud women. And so let's go to chapter 21, verse 9. Why do you want to warn them about loud women? Well, because that loudness it's a dead giveaway that something is very wrong. In 21:9, it's not, now, I mean, this is actually talking about not a forbidden woman. This is talking about the woman that you actually, she's not forbidden from you in a sexual capacity. You went ahead and married her, but you married that loud woman. You married the quarrelsome woman. And here it's better to live in a corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife. You know, one of the things that we want to warn our sons is not to run head over heels for every pretty face that comes along. This is one of the things that Ruby and I are really trying to impress upon our son Joshua, is he's got pretty young ladies that are interested in him. But one of the things I keep telling him is, Joshua, there are certain women that are head and shoulders above the rest. Oh, they may be Christians, but there are certain women who are especially godly. There's a there is a caliber of woman out there, a Christian woman, that I really want my son to wait for until he can find one of this caliber. If you go to 21:19, again, we have it again. It's better to live in a desert land than with a quarrelsome and fretful woman. You go to 22:14. 22:14. The mouth, again, do you see the mouth? You see, this is the thing that I'm really, there's quarrelsomeness, there's loudness, there's a mouth. Every one of these passages that we've been looking at connects something about the woman with the mouth. The mouth of a forbidden woman is a deep pit. He with whom the Lord is angry will fall into it. Let's go to chapter 25, verse 24. Here we have it again. Better to live in a corner of a housetop than in a house shared with a quarrelsome wife. One of the things that we really want to instill in our sons, they don't want a loud wife. They don't want a quarrelsome wife. In other words, I'll tell you this, look at a young lady and see what her relationship with her father is like. See if she submits to authority. Because that's really what the idea of quarrelsomeness has to do with. Yes, it comes out of her mouth, but quarrelsomeness means there's fight in her. She doesn't want to submit. If there's anything that the New Testament says is characteristic of a godly woman, it's submission to her husband. If there's anything that women are admonished to do in their relationship with their husband in the New Testament, it is to submit to their husband. Whether you're in 1 Corinthians 11, whether you're in 1 Peter 3, whether you're in Titus 2, if it just simply doesn't matter where you're at. In Ephesians chapter 5, you've got this emphasis repeatedly that the wife needs to respect the husband and she needs to obey. She needs to submit to the husband. That, more than anything else, is stressed. And so if there's anything, and here's the thing, we want our sons to be wise. We want our daughters to be wise. Do you know one of the big problems is a girl falls for a guy, or a guy falls for a girl. All the hallmarks are there, that the girl's quarrelsome or the guy's lazy. But you know what happens? They just assume that the person is going to get better once they get married. Just the opposite happens. People always put their best foot forward before they're married. And so we don't want to make these assumptions that, if somebody can't control their mouth, or somebody has fight in them, or somebody is quarrelsome, that if you get married, no, that's foolish to do that. That's absolutely foolish. And so you see this over and over. One of the things that the Proverbs hits on is the idea of a woman and her tongue. So that's just kind of a specialized category of all that is said. I mean, just again, I see so much green on the page. I just want you to see it. But look at chapter 26, since we're right there. Verse 2, a curse that is causeless. Well, that's something you do with your mouth. Verse 4, answer not a fool. Answer. Verse 5, answer a fool according to his folly. Verse 7, a proverb in the mouth of fools. Verse 9, a proverb in the mouth of fools. Verse 11, a fool repeats. I mean, there can be the idea of saying the same foolish thing over and over. Verse 13, the sluggard says. Verse 16, answer sensibly. Verse 17, to meddle in a quarrel, you're talking to people. Verse 19, deceives his neighbor, saying, I'm only joking. Verse 20, whisperer. Verse 21, quarrelsome. Verse 22, whisperer. Verse 23, fervent lips. Verse 24, lips. Verse 25, he speaks graciously. Verse 26, deception. Verse 28, a lying tongue, flattering mouth. 27:1, do not boast. Boasting. We do that. Verse 2, let another praise you, not your own mouth, not your own lips. Verse 3, a fool's provocation. Verse 5, rebuke. You see how, I mean, it's just, anyway, you get the point. I know I'm going on and on about this, but listen, this is how important the tongue is. And this is how much the Proverbs have to say about it. And if you haven't been raised under godly parents, one of the things that we can do at whatever point of life we're in is we can come and just bathe in the waters of Proverbs and soak in these realities. Read it and reread it and reread it. Do what I did. Go through and mark passages that have to do with certain topics and just see how much they keep showing up. Now, we could probably expect this. Another thing that comes up again and again in the Proverbs has to do with companionship. It has to do with who our sons and daughters have for friends. That's key. Why? I mean, who knows what the classic New Testament passage is, like maybe 1 Corinthians 15, about companionship? Anybody quote it? What do bad companions do?
Corrupt good morals.
They corrupt good morals. Listen, don't think, I don't think that if you let your children spend time around bad kids, that won't impact them. Now look, I'll just tell you right up. This can be very sensitive. Why? Because you can have family members. You can have family members where, you got a sister and she's got kids. And you don't want your kids spending a whole lot of time with her kids. Your sister's lost. She doesn't raise her children according to the same moral standard that you're trying to raise your kids. And you don't want them to, look, it can be sensitive. And you know what? It can even happen in the church. It can happen in the church where you get somebody that they you know, their standards are different. And we have to protect our children. We as parents have a responsibility. And one of the things that we want to do is we want to instill in our children some wisdom about their companions. This is a big topic here. It starts right in the very beginning. Look at Proverbs chapter 1. We're going to follow this thread through. This is key for us. Look, whether we're adults or children, the truth stands. That if we surround ourselves with fools, it'll make us a fool. If you surround yourself with wise people, that lends itself towards being wise. If you surround yourself with bad companionship, it'll corrupt you. We are a product of the people who put input into our lives. There's no getting around that. And if you think, well, my child's a saint, my child isn't going to be affected, those bad, you know how parents are. Oh, those kids are bad influences on my child. Well, that's true. And we all have to recognize that our own children can be bad influences on other children. We have to recognize that if our children are not converted, they have corruption going on in them just as well. We do recognize that reality. But you know what? Just because that is a reality, that doesn't take away from the wisdom of Proverbs. We want to be directing our children towards the Lord. We want to be teaching them about Christ. We want to be teaching them to call on him, to pray to him, to follow him. And that's what he did. That's what Christ did. Christ said to people, follow me. He didn't say, concern yourself endlessly with whether you've been born again today. That's not what he said to people. He would look at somebody and he would say, follow me. And you know what they did or they didn't. We need to say that to our children. Follow Christ as we follow him. Come with us. Call upon him. Look at him in Scripture. Trust this Christ. We want to lay all of his credentials out there for our children to see. But all the time, we want to be warning them. Does anybody remember the story? Of course, this isn't one of your champions. This is one of the American champions. But you know Adoniram Judson. You know the name? Adoniram Judson. He was, now you all were sending missionaries forth to Asia before the United States did, but Adoniram Judson was our first one. And the first that was notable that we, I guess we would identify as one of the fathers of the missionary thrust, the missionary effort out of the United States of America. And Adoniram Judson went to Burma. But when he was in the States and he grew up in a godly family, believe his father was a pastor. He grew up, and you know what? When he went to college, he fell in with deist friends who corrupted him, who challenged him. And do you know what happened? It's actually a very fearful story. Judson was not yet converted, but this guy by the name of Eames, E-A-M-S, this guy was his companion in college who really led him astray, who was the real voice among the deists in the college where he went. I think he went to Brown University, if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, that doesn't matter. But there was a stormy night when Judson was traveling, and he came to an inn, and the innkeeper told him he only had one room left. He said, but I'm sorry. You're going to have to put up with the groans of a man in the next room who's dying. And all night, the man in the next room was just groaning and crying out, and it was horrific. And Judson was he couldn't sleep, and it was so much racket over there. And in the morning, he went to the innkeeper and he asked about the man, and the man said, no, the guy in the next room died during the night. And the innkeeper told him, his name was Eames, here's this guy, and he died. He died a horrible death. He went to hell. All apart from that, God had mercy upon the soul of Adoniram Judson. But I'll tell you that man that died in the next room was evil, and he was very much minded to lead Adoniram Judson right away from Christ. And I recognize God is sovereign in these things. But brethren, sometimes sending our children to school, listen, we as parents need to be wise. What you don't want to do is wake up one day when your children are 25 and have totally hardened themselves against the Lord, to realize you put them in a school where because as a parent, these are choices you make. You put them in a school and you expose them to influences that led them to reject everything that you believe. And that's what we're going to find out here is what companions do. Companions have the ability to entice and to really influence. There's a peer pressure. We know this, and the Proverbs are not ignorant to it. Now notice Proverbs chapter 1, verse 10. Right off the bat, hear, my son, your father's instruction. Forsake not your mother's teaching. My son, verse 10, if sinners entice you, do not consent. But you talk about something you need to instill in your sons and your daughters. It's, you know what? We don't want to raise a bunch of yes men, sons and daughters, who just go along with the pack. We need to raise children who have the ability to say no, because you know this as well as I do. Your children are going to be confronted by evil in this world, and we need to instill it in our children to be able to say no. Don't consent. What do they say? They say, come with us. That's what the comrades, that's what the companions, that's what friends do in this world. Come with us. Do what we do. Be how we are. Say it how we say it. Be like us. That's it. And he says, don't consent. When they say, let's go do this, and you see, Sheol, or verse 15, my son, do not walk in the way with them. Hold back your foot. Now, I know there's very specific things about their wanting to steal and they're wanting to lie in wait for blood, but it doesn't matter what kind of evil it is. Companions will lead our children into evil. We as parents need to stay so close to this. And listen, with the internet today, you can bring companions into your home via the internet that you never even thought to allow there. With the internet, we can give access to our children. We can give access to all sorts of companions around the world that can be negative influences on our children. And it can happen right through a phone. It can happen right through a computer. We want to be careful here. So let's look for more companion text. Go to Proverbs 2, verse 12. But it talks about discretion in verse 11, watching over you, understanding, guarding you, delivering you from the way of evil. You see, that's it. We don't want our children running around with companions that are going to take them in the way of evil. And it says, from men of perverted speech. It kind of goes along with what we were looking at before about you can just tell people by their speech. You know what? You want to train your children to know how to decipher and diagnose men by their mouths. You want to train your children that wicked and perverted speech means you have a wicked and perverted person who is not going to be a good influence. We need to try to instill that. Where else? How about chapter 4, verse 14? Do not enter the path of the wicked. And it's the same kind of thing. Do not walk in the way of the evil. Avoid it. Do not go in it. Turn away from it. Pass on. I mean, if we're going to be godly parents to our children, we are going to warn and warn and warn. We're going to correct them. We're going to rebuke them. We're going to talk to them. We're going to try to point them in the right direction. You know what? I recognize that our children have hearts. We need God to do something that is outside of our power. But brethren, so often God works through human means. And to think that because God's sovereign and because God has an elect people, that it really doesn't matter how you raise your children, that's just blatant hyper-Calvinism. It is wrong thinking. It's bad thinking. God uses means. And God uses godly parents pouring the scripture into their children. Never think that he doesn't. He didn't give us this. If we're just supposed to be these passive hyper-Calvinists who do nothing with our children and just kind of throw them to the wolves and say, well, if God purposed to save them, he's going to save them. After all, you told us the story of Adoniram Judson. I didn't tell you it for that reason. I told you that because I want you to see that there are evil influences out there that can really lead our children astray. Another verse on companions would be I see something else coming up a bunch, but anyway, look at chapter 13, verse 20. I mean, just this is a verse to take what I've been saying concerning companions. If there's one verse above all the others that speak about companionship in Proverbs, it might be this one that you would want to really focus in on and just drill into the brains of your children. Listen to it. Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise. I mean, how? Now, look, I know this is a worldly example, but take it for what it's worth. In the United States, there is a talk show radio guy. His name is Dave Ramsey. He's a financial advisor. His show is basically on helping people get out of financial difficulty. And you know what he said? He said he went bankrupt. And he climbed his way out of it. And he said this. One of the things that he constantly tells people is don't listen to broke people. He said, you all have people that are wanting to give you counsel, your counselors, your companions, your friends, your family. They want to give you counsel on how you ought to handle your money. He said, don't listen to anybody who's broke. He said, if you want to learn how to make money, go speak to wealthy people. Offer to take a wealthy guy out to lunch and ask him how he got to where he is. You see the wisdom in that? Now, I know that's earthly wisdom. That's worldly wisdom. I'm just trying to figure out how to, but you know, there is a massive amount of wisdom in that. If you want to figure out how to do something well, you know what? Do you know what would happen? After I married Ruby, do you know what I found? That anytime we visited another church somewhere, or if some pastors and their wives visited the church we were in, Ruby typically would seek out the godly pastor's wife or the godliest women in churches that we would visit. Ruby would seek them out and ask them how to raise the kids, how to be a godly wife. Do you know what she didn't do? She didn't go ask counsel from the people whose marriages were horrible, whose kids were out of control. She went and asked the people who had already done it and done it well. Did you see what's being said here? If you walk with the wise, you become wise. The companion of fools will suffer harm. You see, the thing is, if you walk with fools, you'll be a fool. If you walk with the wise, you'll be wise. And that's a principle that carries over into anything in life. If you want to know how to do something well, don't go get your advice from somebody who's not figured out how to do it well. Go get your advice from somebody who has figured out how to do it well. And so if there's something in your life that you do want to do well, then go talk to that person. You know, there's nothing like a bunch of young guys standing around. Do you know what young people are? Young people are people who think they have everything figured out when they actually have nothing figured out. That's what and you know what? Most of us were there, so you know what I'm saying is true. And what we want to be as parents who are pouring into our children and really letting them know you don't have things figured out. And the wisest way you're going to approach life is if you surround yourself with people that are wise. And we want to instill that in our children. So anyway, we could undoubtedly keep going here, but that one right there. Walk with the wise, be wise. Walk with the fool, you'll be a fool, and it'll bring harm to you. Because remember what we dealt with last week in defining wisdom? If you're wise for yourself. If you're a fool, it brings you harm. You see, this is what we really want to instill in our children, that if our children go off and do foolish things, they're going to suffer for it. We really want to instill that in our children. Look, pursue your own greatest good. Pursue it, pursue it, pursue it. Now, very quickly, just one last thing. I know we've almost gone an hour and a half, but I'm just going to, there's a number of things we could look at. Maybe, who knows what we'll do after the first of the year. But just one other thing here. One of the things that is really instilled in the son is a good work ethic. And I'm just going to show you this very fast. But look with me at all these verses that have to do with laziness. Starting maybe chapter 6, verse 6. One of the things I think it's so important to emphasize this for is this. We've had a lot of single young men at Grace. And what I found is most of these guys did not grow up with a father that had a good work ethic. They don't have a good example. And so a lot of these young men needed to really have a lot poured into them as far as encouraging, directing, talking through, just sometimes kicking them in the rear. I mean, it's sluggard, laziness, lacking a good work ethic. This is something that the proverb deals with. And we ought to figure that it would be. I mean, if there's something important to instill in our sons, it's not only watch out for women, it's not only watch out for companions, it's also have a good work ethic. And so here you see it, chapter 6, verse 6. Go to the ant, O sluggard. So here it is. Pouring wisdom into our sons, we want them to recognize. How long will you lie there? Verse 9, O sluggard. When will you arise from your sleep? We want to instill especially in our sons. Guys, one of the things I plan to do when I return is deal with a family series. And look, what I'm going to stress to you from day one is this is not Tim Conway coming to tell you how to do family. I want you to see what God says That's all. That's what I'm concerned about. Not that you do it the same way I did, but that you do it the way God mandates. And you can't get away from this. Women are primarily in Scripture, right? With Proverbs 31 and right on into the New Testament, women are supposed to be keepers at home, and men are supposed to be working and providing for the family. And I don't know exactly all that you've been taught here, but when I come back, I just simply want to show you what God's word says on this. This is no GCC standard. This is no Tim Conway standard. This is Scripture. And really, the daughter here is not being repeatedly hit about being a sluggard. Now, there's no question, Proverbs 31, the woman is very industrious. The woman did some things outside the house, but the house, the home, that was the center of the godly wife, the excellent wife. Her home is the center of her life, her husband. Her life revolves around that. The man, all through Scripture, the expectation is that the man is going to be a hard worker. The man is not going to sit at home and be Mr. Mom. The man is going to go out and he is going to work and he is going to provide for the family. And we've got to instill this, because I know some things are not, so there are things out of whack at Grace Fellowship Manchester, according to this, to the biblical standard. And right here at the beginning, we just emphasize this. The Proverbs hit on this. Son, you see it in 6:1. My son, go to the ant. Why? Because the ant's always working. I mean, ants are just industrious folk. And it says, consider her ways and be wise. What is wisdom? Be a hard worker. I really think that we've got some men in the church that are underachievers. And I mean, I really want to encourage. I'm hoping. I mean, look, it's just part of the church that we're helping bring people along and to conform to the biblical standard. We don't want men that sleep too much. We don't want men on their backside too much. We don't want men on sofa too much. We don't want men who just sloth their life away in front of the TV or a computer screen too much. When will you rise from your sleep? Little sleep, little slumber, and what happens? Poverty. That's what happens. Listen, there's no reason that the men in the church cannot be working towards acquiring a home of their own. Every single man in the church. It won't happen if there isn't hard work. It won't happen if there isn't a proper work ethic. We need men in the church that are going to be able to not only support a pastor, we need men in the church that can support a church building and support missions and support the endeavors of the church. We need a very industrious church. We need men who are making money. We need men who can provide for their families and provide for the church, provide for the extension of the kingdom of Christ. This is absolutely essential. You know what the New Testament says, that let the thief no longer steal. He needs to work with his hands. Why? So that he now has something to give to those who are in need. Not just not steal and work with his hands so that he can provide for his own family. That's good, but it doesn't stop there. But so that he can provide for people in need. And so this idea of laziness, wow, how much it shows up. Go to chapter 10. Chapter 10, verse 4, a slack hand causes poverty. The hand of the diligent makes rich. He who gathers in summer is a prudent son. He who sleeps in harvest is a son who brings shame. This idea, just repeated. Chapter 10, verse 26, like vinegar to the teeth and smoke to the eyes, so is the sluggard to those who send him. Or we go to chapter 12, verse 11. Whoever works his land will have plenty of bread. See, this is industriousness. This is the guy that's going after it. For some of us, it might be not he who works his land. It may be he who gets up early and gets out there and is applying for jobs is going to have plenty of bread. He who is not easily discouraged is the one who's going to have plenty of bread. He who keeps after it. If you follow worthless pursuits, You know what I've seen is a lot of guys, they have good plans, but the plans never come to fruition. They're always following some kind of worthless pursuit, some get rich quick thing, or some way they've got this idea, but the things just never come together. You don't want to be that guy. As we keep going here, chapter 12, verse 24. The hand of the diligent will rule. You see, hard work is rewarded, while the slothful will be put to forced labor. Here's the thing. You take somebody who's not very aggressive, who's not going after it, getting after it. You know what happens when they get to be 50 years old or 60 years old? Or what ultimately happens is they end up having to do things that nobody else wants to do and they don't want to do. They're kind of forced to do things that they would rather not do. And one of the things about your country is it does this social system, social network, this welfare state that you guys have here, it does not promote good work ethic. I'll just tell you that right off. I can see it, that a family can have husband and wife out of work, and you guys don't experience the same kind of panic that we would experience in the United States. And even there, we have some welfare, but you guys have far more here. They make it way too convenient for people not to work, and it's not good. Because, brethren, this is not just about just having a good work ethic. This is about the ethic that you instill in your children. This has to do with future generations. I'll guarantee you this, men, the work ethic you have, it will impact your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren. There's a hereditary element to this. And it has to do with the church. It has to do, brethren, what churches send out missionaries to foreign mission fields who go in faraway, very difficult places and work hard to take the gospel? It's not people who don't make it at home. It's people who really strive and are very fruitful at home who then go out to other places. And so I really am going to be encouraging this very strongly. Anyway, we could keep going. We definitely could keep going. It's in chapter 13, verse 4, chapter 14, verse 23, 18, verse 9, 19, verse 5, 15, 24, chapter 20, verses 4, 13. All these, and it keeps going. Chapter 21, chapter 22, chapter 24. It deals with the sluggard. It deals with the work ethic. This is another thing that is absolutely essential and critical to be instilling in our sons. And like I said before, we have to have these things instilled in ourselves first if we're ever going to instill them in our sons. And so anyway, I want to leave you on that note. And there's a whole number of other things that the Proverbs emphasizes as well, but these are some of the things that are very obvious. They just jump off the page if you read it over and over. It also deals, like I said, with the rod. I mean, if there's any place in the Bible that talks about spanking our children, it's the book of Proverbs. We could go through. It has a lot to say about accepting counsel, accepting rebuke. We need to be teachable. That's a big thing. Anyway, there's a number of other things that we could look at, but we're out of time right now. So as always, is there any last word or anything anybody wants to say or ask?
That was very helpful, brother. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, amen. Let's pray.
Thank you.
Well, Father, I pray for the men and women that you've had tune in tonight. Lord, I pray that you'd help us, give us grace to be able to hear and accept this instruction as it comes from your word. And Lord, I pray especially for the brothers here. Just, Lord, I pray that the grace of God, I see it at work. And I'm very hopeful. I'm certainly not discouraged by the situation. I see men who are growing and who are moving in a good direction, and we recognize how the life of the righteous is. We looked at it last week. It grows brighter and brighter until the fullness of noonday. And I see that in the lives of these brothers, and I pray that would just increase, and there would be a greater and greater shining and an upward momentum in the lives of these men, and that you would make the men of the church just good leaders in society, good leaders in the church, good leaders in family. And I pray that you would help the sisters as well. Help us with our children. Help us to, Lord, help us. Help us to be that wise man or that wise woman of the book of Proverbs. We pray in the name of our Lord Jesus Christ. Amen.